Good morning, everyone. Good morning for those who are in Brazil. Well, have a nice day. All of those who are not in Brazil, but are in other parts of the world, South America, and so on. I'm Vanessa, Director for Institutional Relations at the Innovation Agency of the University of Campinas in São Paulo, Brazil. Welcome to this webinar. Well, first things, I'd like to context you a little bit about this program. We have a program that is called Global Partners. We started it like 2 years ago. In fact, because we wanted to be a bit more in contact with some universities, some partner universities in South America. But the program grew. And well, right now we have other universities participating of it, like the University of South Africa and the University of Florida. It is a program in which we have a few activities during the year. This year, for example, we had, this is the third webinar, and we had one activity for mentoring of startups connected to those universities that are partners. If you are from a university around the world and would like to be part of it, just contact us and we'll be glad to let you know a bit more about this program. And we'll start right in the beginning of next year to plan the activities for 2021 that I'm sure will be great activities just like this year. Well, for today, I'd like to give you a few instructions on how we will deal with this webinar. Well, first thing, we're recording it. So if you'd like to see it later on again, please, it will be in our YouTube channel, the YouTube channel of the Inova Unicamp Innovation Agency, right? The webinar will be held in English, right? And we will disseminate this in our social media. Another point is very important. I'd like to ask you, if you have any questions during the webinar, just send those questions during questions and answers. So you have the Q&As just right in the bottom of your screen, right? The Q&A. But if you'd like to talk to everyone, you can chat over the chat thing. Just don't send your questions through the chat. Otherwise, we'll miss those questions. And we're really keen to hear what are the questions you have about those. So, well, send the questions through the Q&A. And another point is that when you say, hey, good morning, and so on, try to send it over to all panelists and attendees, right? So that everyone that is with us today can say hello for you as well. Generally, we have people only sending it to the panelists, so check that. Today, the agenda is the following. Well, I have chatted a little bit with you, and right after it, we'll have the panel of experiences. We have great experiences to share with you today. Caroline Hyde from Cambridge Enterprise, Erik from the University of Florida, Rona Samler from T3, the Technion Technology Transfer in Israel, and Professor Newton Frateschi from Unicamp will tell you how we're dealing with it, right? Right after it, we'll address all the questions and have a nice debate with everyone. Well, let's start. The photo is the cue so that we finish the opening of that. So I'm very glad today to ask Caroline. Caroline is our first speaker, Head of International Relations and Outreach of the Cambridge Enterprise in the United Kingdom. Hello, Caroline. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Vanessa. And thank you to yourself and Inova Unicamp for the invitation to speak today. I'm just going to share my screen.
Do that. Let's check if it's working. Perfect.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you. I'm really, really delighted. Oh, has that disappeared?
Yeah, I'm going away when you talk.
Is this
I'm
your
going to
fault?
leave. All right. So be my guest and you can start. All right, Caroline.
There we go. So thank you. I'm really, really delighted to be part of the conversation and to share some of the insight really into how the University of Cambridge supports startups and spin-outs. As Vanessa said, my name's Caroline Hyde. I'm Head of International Relations and Business for the Cambridge Enterprise, and we are the commercialization arm of the University of Cambridge. So I actually joined Cambridge Enterprise a couple of days before the UK went into lockdown with COVID-19. So my experience of international has been somewhat virtual. So it would have been lovely to have actually been with you today, but hopefully this is a good second option. All right, so. So just a little bit about Cambridge Enterprise and an overview. So we began as an internal support office within the University of Cambridge back in the 1970s. And after a number of different iterations, we were actually ourselves spun out as a wholly owned subsidiary in 2006. So we're 100% owned by the University of Cambridge, but because we are a limited company rather than the university, which is a charitable entity, what this does is it enables us to fully engage in commercial activities and make surpluses from those activities. These surpluses are then gifted back up to the University of Cambridge to be used for teaching and additional research activity. So our mission very much aligns with that of the university. And it's really about unlocking the power of research to create social and environmental benefit. So with 50 years of technology transfer activity and arguably acknowledged as one of the most successful global tech transfer offices, we've now grown to a team of about 80 people working across 3 core functions. So we have consultancy, which is supporting our academic community to leverage their experience, their expertise, and their research through collaborations with third parties. We have our technology transfer department, which is the largest part of Cambridge Enterprise. And they work with our academic staff and students to help understand and protect their IP, and then negotiate and manage any licensing contracts. And then we have our seed funds team. And this is what I'm really going to speak to you about today. So this section manages our activity around business creation and investments for spin-outs and startups. Also worth noting, we have a sister company, Cambridge Innovation Capital, and that provides follow-on funding. And I will talk about that a bit later on. So technology coming out of a university is frequently at an incredibly early stage, and often our technologies are solutions for problems that we really don't even know exist yet. So it's very hard to find arm's length licensees who are prepared to take either a 5, potentially 10, if not 20-year sort of development commitment to working with this early stage technology. And when we started, it was actually incredibly hard to find investors who would be prepared to take a risk on academics or researchers who looked like a very long way away from what we would see as a founder or a CEO of a company. So I think slightly differently to the US model, in the UK, we actually have an awful lot of work to do internally to prepare possible startups or spin-outs to what we would call investable businesses. So the seeds funds team, a core part of their work is actually advising and developing a business plan and strategy. So we use a whole network of mentors. We have 3 entrepreneurs in residence within the organization. So these are external experts who work with us on a 12 to 18-month basis. And they work with us in life sciences, in the physical sciences. And we also have one who works with us on talent development. We also have, as I said, a broad network who we can rely on to help and advise our prospective businesses on everything from testing and validation to building out their team to looking at developing a go-to-market strategy. Another critical part is actually connecting our founders to investment and investors. So obviously, we, having been around now for 50 years, we have a very large network of angel and VC investors, but this is not just about warm introductions. So we run the Cambridge Enterprise Venture Partners, and this is a club for potential investors. So you have to be an active investor participating and engaging with our companies in order to be a part of it. And we run one dinner per term. And at each dinner, as well as a lovely college meal and an after dinner speaker, 3 companies will get to pitch to an average of about 50 investors at each dinner. So this is another way that we're helping really our businesses to connect with other investors. And then as the company develops and starts to grow, we continue with ongoing support. So our team will leverage their vast early stage experience with normally a board seat. So either as a non-exec director or as an observer on the board. And our network continues to provide many other support services. So whether that be around HR, finance, legal, IP protection, as well as providing other non-executive board members and potential those critical early senior management hires. And it's probably worth saying that the University of Cambridge brand does attract significant influence and is a really good help to a lot of our initial companies. So we've got 2 ways of equity investing into university startups and spin-outs. And I quickly cover the tech transfer side, but I'll spend most of our time talking about the seed funds. So because of the way that our office works, quite frequently our tech transfer team will often be working with academics or researchers in terms of patenting and protecting the IP and then licensing that out. And that same academic or researcher could also be working with our seed funds team in terms of developing a startup or a spin-up for seed funding. So in order to get the licensing spun back into the startup or the spin-out, what we tend to do is rather than take a upfront license fee, which would in a sense swallow up half of the seed fund's investment money, we would take an equity investment in lieu of that. So normally it's around 10%. It would cover the standard things that we would normally look for. So an upfront fee, royalties, and any milestone payments that might come. Obviously, with such a small equity investment, this quite quickly gets diluted over a number of funding rounds. But on average, by the time it gets to Series B or Series C round, that initial investment is usually worth around £100,000 of return. So in this instance, where we have taken the equity in lieu of license payments, Cambridge Enterprise is the shareholder. So on the other side, our seeds funds team, we're able to invest through a number of different mechanisms, but equity investments can be up to £1 million per venture. And they're overseen by an investment committee. So we normally invest as part of a consortium. Quite frequently looking for people with bigger and deeper pockets than ourselves who can stay with the venture sort of in longer runs and more funding rounds. Where we invest through seed funds here, then the university itself is the shareholder. So as well as supporting Cambridge Enterprise's mission, our seeds fund team also has a financial mission to be evergreen and to support the fund over time. So our fund supports university ideas. So it can be university IP, it can be our academics, it can be our students, and also recent alumni. And so we take them from the very earliest stage of development right the way through to Series A. And financial returns are then reinvested back into the fund in order to support the next generation of ideas. So one of our key markers in terms of success is when portfolio companies secure additional funding from outside of Cambridge Enterprise. But how did we start? Well, in the late 1980s, it became very evident that resources were required to assist commercial exploitation of research within the university. And so the Cambridge Quantum Fund was established, and it was funding from the university, from several colleges, and from 2 city institutions. And that was able to award up to £100,000 for development of ideas that could potentially turn into startups or spin-outs. So as the 1990s progressed, we were seeing more activity, more involvement, and sort of by the mid-90s, again, this expansion meant there was a need for more cash, more capital to be able to do more seed funding. So the university established the University Venture Fund with a pot of £2.4 million that the university's treasurer had pulled together from the sale for some shares that it had held for a very long time. I know this is Cambridge. When you say kind of pulled together 2.4 million, it would be nice if we could all just pull together 2.4 million, right? But the University Venture Fund remains one of the oldest surviving university seed funds. So it made many very highly significant and successful investments back in the early days. Companies such as Aztec Therapeutics, Cambridge Capital Display, Entropic, Kudos, and Selexa. And between them, these companies delivered innovations in drug discovery, plastic electronics, speech recognition, and gene sequencing. So this has actually enabled the fund to grow and develop. And then by the end of the 1990s, the UK government was beginning to develop some really effective policies and intervention around university technology transfer, recognizing its importance in spin-out startups and innovation. And our strong record of operating in this sector positioned us really well to be able to bid and be successfully awarded around £3 million of government funding to set up the University Challenge Fund. And this was matched with £1 million of the university's own money as well. And so the funds were designed to support very nascent companies from proof of concept up until the point where they were able to bring on additional investors. So by the time that Cambridge Enterprise was spun out in 2006, these various funds had then been collated and amalgamated under Cambridge Enterprise seed funds, and already had a track record of real success. Worth noting as well that another government intervention in the late 1990s, the government established the Enterprise Investment Scheme, EIS, and this provided tax relief to investors who were prepared to risk their own personal funding on very high risk early stage investment into early stage businesses. So early adoption had come from a lot of high net worth individuals who were investing as part of their kind of tax relief or portfolio of investment. But it became apparent that it wasn't really being utilized very well by academic institutions. So in 2012, working with an FCA, Financial Conduct Authority, fund manager called Parkwalk, the university set up the University of Cambridge Enterprise Fund, or UCIF. And it was specifically targeting Cambridge University alumni, as well as other investors. But the idea was really to try and target our alumni with opportunities to invest in early stage science and technology spin-outs coming out of the university. This went really, really well, and the fund raised £3 million from the alumni and from some local Cambridge angels with a very short space of time, with an initial minimum investment of about £10,000. A number of years later, that's now a £25,000 minimum subscription. So Cambridge Enterprise is the portfolio advisor to the fund, but the UCIF fund is managed by Parkwalk. But what this means is that it can frequently invest alongside our seed fund as well. So that's another way of us putting money and investment into spin-ups and startups. So what does our support look like? Well, I mentioned that we only invest in university IP or other connections within the university. Predominantly early stage science and tech businesses, and this is where the bulk of our activity has been. Although we now have designated pots of investment for clean tech, for arts, humanities and social sciences, and most recently a social ventures fund as well. So this is us kind of trying to broaden, but also in line with our ESG aspirations around ethical and efficient investing as well. So first of all, we have our Pathfinder scheme. And this is a £20,000 loan to develop the proposition or proof of concept. So this would be the first thing that we would steer our academics or researchers or students towards. This then follows on by the Fast 50, strangely named, as it's actually up to £75,000 convertible loan for more in-depth due diligence and sort of development on the company. The convertible loan is normally converted into equity in the next round. I think in the last 5 years, we've maybe had one loan that was just repaid. And then the equity investments. So these are typically £250,000 of seed fund investment that then can be matched with the USEF fund, so making up to £500,000 per investment round. Seed funds can invest up to 1 million. So matched with the EIS, this is essentially 2 million into any one company. Pathfinder and our Fast 50 investments are made by the seed funds team. So they have the decision on who those go to. With the equity investments, they go through an investment committee for decisions. And then Cambridge Innovation Capital may provide follow-on funding for select companies. So this is just an overview really of the scale of our activity. You can sort of see the numbers of work that we do. So from around about 140 disclosures, we end up with 10 companies formed and an active caseload of around 30. So just quickly, one of the things collectively, the seed funds are focused on proof of concept and very early stage company creation. And it was recognized that one of the dangers or one of the difficulties for growing companies was the so-called valley of death. Where seed funding is no longer available, but they're not quite at the stage, or they're too small to attract venture capital or survive on revenues alone. In addition to this, there's another economic driver, which was one of the companies that I mentioned before, Selexa, who'd been one of the very early seed funds investments, around about £100,000. 10 years later, a number of investment rounds, a couple of acquisitions, and Selexa was sold to Illumina for $650 million. And the university's share was 250,000. So it became quite apparent within the university that actually developing a follow-on fund that would enable the university to stay with some of the companies for longer into those funding rounds would be really advantageous. So in 2013, they created Cambridge Innovation Capital, and it has the remit really to provide follow-on funding. So the first initial round they did was 50 million. A couple of years later, they went out again and raised a further 75 million capital. And they have a slightly broader remit in that they can invest in Cambridge IP, and about 50% of their portfolio are previous seed funds portfolio companies, but they also can invest in Cambridge-based companies, so companies that are working in the wider ecosystem as well. So they, I think about 2019, March 2019, CIC also went out, raised a further 150 million, which was one of the largest private financing rounds in Europe. So their aim really,
almost there, Caroline.
Yep, their aim really is long-term patient capital. So just wanted to finish with a slide that shows our investment in numbers. So you've got the most recent financial year, but also cumulative. And one of the big things for us, as I said, was that we recently hit the 2 billion in terms of follow-on funding raised by our portfolio ventures. And as you can see, that we've now invested just under 30 million with 241 investments made into 139 companies, and an average kind of 4.1x multiple across all realized ventures. But more importantly, perhaps for us, is the impact that we've supported and enabled our ventures to make through the commercialization of their research. Companies really that have gone on to create change in almost every field. And it's really this combination of impact and financial return which is what drives all of the Cambridge Enterprise activity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Very nice presentation. Well, let's get to our next speaker. That's, I guess, Erik. Hi, Erik.
Hey, good morning.
Erik, I'm trying.
Oh.
Erik is from the University of Florida, long-term partner as well. Be welcome.
Great, thanks. The thing I've already learned in this webinar is don't allow people to put your current your bio picture up next to your what you really look like now. I'm wearing the same jacket, but the hair is a little grayer. So it's a pleasure to be here. I've decided not to use PowerPoint slides here. I'm going to kind of walk you through verbally some of the things that we're doing at the University of Florida. Let me start by kind of giving a little of my background. So I've been in the University of Florida for many, many years. I'm not in our tech transfer office. I'll speak to that substantially today. I work out of our College of Engineering, but we have somewhat of a distributed model in terms of responsibilities for moving technology from the colleges into the licensing office and then out, whether it be through license to a large company or startups and so on. So I want to try and give that perspective. And then I've also been involved in a couple of venture funds that are focused on very early stage, specifically university technology. So I'll try and give a little bit of perspective from that from that angle as well. So let me give you maybe a very quick overview. If you're not familiar with the University of Florida, we are very, very proud to be a global partner of Unicamp. It's been a wonderful experience. I urge you, if you're thinking about it, talk to Vanessa. We look for partners in different parts of the world that are driven, that are efficient and mission oriented, and I found that very, very much in Unicamp. So it's a real pleasure to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. First, let me start with kind of the University of Florida. So we're a very large university in the United States. We're also one of a top quality university. We're the #6 public university in the United States. Again, large. We're one of 6 universities in the U.S. that have every discipline on one campus. So whether it's medicine or liberal arts and sciences, law, engineering, food and agricultural sciences, if you go across all the disciplines, there's very, very few universities that have all of that on a single campus. Part of that is the way that the U.S. university system is structured. And it provides us with a lot of opportunities when we think about and go through the process of looking at startup companies and technology that startups might be interested in. We have a relatively large research portfolio, about $926 million in research activities last year. And that then spawns inventions. We had 393 inventions last year, 132 licenses. And every year we do somewhere in the range of 15 to 20 spin-off companies. And these are spin-offs from the technology. They don't count, consulting companies and student companies and those types of things. So it's a relatively large enterprise. And what's been interesting to us is in the face of everything we faced, all of us have faced over the last year in COVID, we've actually hit record numbers. And so I think, that was a concern early on in the year, was how is this going to impact us? Obviously, it impacted many of the faculty and their labs, and we worked our way through that. But from whether you talk about research or invention disclosures or licenses, we were able to hit record numbers. So the university has adapted, I think, very, very well to the current environment and some of the things that will carry going forward. We exist in the state of Florida. We exist in Gainesville, Florida, which is a very small town. It's a college town in a very large state. So Florida has 22 million residents, about 22 million, third largest in the US, but we are in a small town. So some of you that may be working in any university that's in a small town that's maybe remote or distant from some of the larger towns or cities that have more of a wealth of venture capital or investment capital. I'll speak to that a little bit. In terms of then kind of how we operate, So if you look at our model, we have a group called UF Innovate, and that group has a number of responsibilities. And so we've brought together responsibilities around technology licensing, around new venture creation, around incubation, and specifically some programs focused on small companies, all under this umbrella called UF Innovate that Jim O'Connell at the University of Florida heads. And to support that, we also then have organizations that are within the different colleges. So for instance, my organization in the College of Engineering is called the Florida Engineering Experiment Station. And part of our remit is to essentially support the faculty and the students as they go through their research processes and support them specifically in kind of the area of tech invention and commercialization and moving that to the licensing office. So we do that through a number of programs that are focused everything from kind of educational programs to programs where we help them literally work through the processes with the licensing office. We have a number of programs that are focused on bringing external entrepreneurs and investors into the university to not only look at what we're doing, but also obviously to think about the opportunities that are available for their investment in the university. The licensing office through UF Innovate also has a group called Ventures, and their focus is very much on startups, launching startups, bringing entrepreneurs and investors into the university structure, helping them to understand how a university really operates. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges as we think about how we work with business, how we work with entrepreneurs in the investment community. And again, let me also speak from my perspective of having been an investor in two funds that invested specifically in university technology. There were challenges there in terms of not only kind of the early stage of the technology, and I think all of us face that. Our technology typically is very, very early stage, many times not only in terms of the development of the technology, but really understanding the market for that technology, the intellectual property position. And so, many of those that have been kind of in traditional investor roles, they're much more comfortable and used to being able to deal with technology that's at a much later stage where it may have at least some traction in the market to show kind of how the market is reacting to the benefits of the technology. We do have an internal investment fund. It's not large within the university. It's about $1 million a year. And we use that very, very selectively to co-invest in opportunities coming out of the University of Florida, but we don't lead. So, with that fund, we try and make 3 and 4 investments a year. We do have a fairly active portfolio of investors that are coming in regularly and entrepreneurs that are coming in regularly through our licensing offices and sometimes through the different colleges to look at the kinds of opportunities that we have. And the thing that we can do most for them is really help them to understand how to look at these opportunities if they've not done this before. And if they have worked with universities before, and specifically, the University of Florida in our case, we can, the greatest value proposition we can provide to them is helping them vet through, a large number of opportunities. Excuse me. And, so again, if you look at kind of our annual production, we're typically producing 350 to just short of 400 inventions a year. So it's a large kind of portfolio, not only for our licensing office to work its way through, but also, for investors and entrepreneurs that come in. So again, I think there's two kinds of services that we can and do provide. One is the entrepreneur and the investor that really hasn't dealt with universities before and university technology, helping them to understand the process, the link not only to the technology, but to the research teams as well, and what they can bring to the value proposition if an entrepreneur and investor decides that they have a real interest in that, to a different value proposition for those that are more experienced, where it's really a matter of vetting through not only the technology, but frankly, sometimes, some of the best opportunities haven't made their way to the licensing office yet. And so we can work with them under confidentiality terms, obviously, to work with our faculty and students in our labs to really understand kind of the broader perspective of the opportunities that are in given labs. As a state, we have a couple of programs that are focused on launching companies and through commercialization of technology. One is called the Institute for Commercialization of Florida Research, and it's been around in another form since 2008. And they were really formed by the Florida legislature to invest in opportunities coming out of all of the public universities in the state of Florida. And as of 3 years ago, have widened that aperture to focus on technology opportunities that go beyond that. They're managed by a private group called Florida Funders. And so they have a relatively large portfolio, but in these cases, relatively small investments. And those investments, can certainly be made in kind of a loan or a debt instrument. They can be made as a convertible. They can be made as an equity investment. The second kind of interesting investment vehicle from the state of Florida is something called matching grants. And this is, I think, somewhat unique from what I've seen, in that the state of Florida has provided over the years the three largest universities in the state, University of Florida, University of Central Florida, and South Florida, with funding to provide matching grants to investors or entrepreneurs that come into the university, see an opportunity, and are willing to invest their own money in furthering the research in the university. So if you think about this, most of the time, an investor comes in, and the transaction is essentially to come in, look at the opportunities that are resident in the licensing office, license that out, and then invest in the startup company that comes from that and hopefully takes that to market. With this matching grants program, the investment really is made not only by the state or the university on behalf of the state, but also a matching investment by the company. But it's all of that money then goes into the university labs to specifically to further that research with a commercialization focus. So it's a really interesting, I think, proposition. If anybody's interested in it, I'm happy to send you more information on it. But it's an interesting proposition in that the funds really come into the labs rather than going into the startup company. And it's a shared risk, shared return model. The terms of that are really dictated by kind of the standard licensing terms, which in many U.S. university cases is if a company wants to come in and invest in advancement of research, there's an opportunity for first option to negotiate a license. And so that's an interesting model as well. Let me maybe say one more thing. I've got about 3 minutes left. And so that is maybe the perspective from now an external organization. So as I was working in an external venture fund that was looking at university technologies. One of the things that was challenging was there were a lot of opportunities, but those opportunities really required kind of a different view than simply the looking at maybe more advanced opportunities that you would find outside of university. So if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen and let me just share with you a model that we created that was specifically focused on looking at university technologies. Now, there's many, many models in the world. We created this when I was in one of the venture funds so that we could do two things. One is very, very quickly navigate our way through a lot of technologies that might be coming out of a university, but secondly, to bring into account the differences between university licensable technology and maybe some that you would find outside of the university. And again, this is my external perspective as an investor having looked in. So this is simply kind of a weighted scoring model that looks at the different elements of the intellectual property in terms of defensibility and prior claims and lit searches and that type of thing. And so we would use this essentially to look at a broad portfolio of technologies and this was never going to give us the answer as to what did we want to invest in. This was going to allow us to try and essentially prioritize and in some cases eliminate technologies that we thought really didn't have an opportunity. So obviously, if you look at external technology, look at intellectual property and kind of the technology assessment, and these weightings that we have on the left here are really weightings that we applied that says not everything is weighted equally when you look at these kinds of things. So technology, Mark, you would expect these kinds of things. But then a big part of this was really the researcher assessment, right? Because you're going to have to, because the technology is so early stage, you are going to have to work with the researchers. And so we really, in our analysis, tried to look at a very, very hard at, the researchers that we would be working with. Because if you're from university, you know that there are some researchers that may be more or more ready to work with an outside entity, whether an investment fund or a startup, to commercialize the technologies and others. So that's one model. The second, let me offer a second maybe for consideration, and this is kind of a deck. So if you put many faculty in front of, or students in front of outside companies and investors and ask them to give a pitch on their technology, you're going to get kind of the standard academic pitch, which is loaded with technical detail and almost nothing else. And then at the other end of the spectrum is, a pitch that's more of an investor pitch, right? And so what we did is created this kind of middle ground where we merge the two. And we've used this as a mechanism, not only to try and get the faculty and the students to better communicate with the external world, the investment community, the entrepreneurial community, but also, frankly, it's a great educational tool for the faculty and students, because it gets them to start thinking about some of the things that they normally maybe don't think about in terms of the commercialization opportunity. So I won't go through detail. I'm happy to share this if anybody's interested, but really what it does is it takes elements of kind of a standard technical presentation and an investment presentation and merges these together. And so again, we use this in some cases with our faculty and students to get them to essentially start to transition in their mind from what they would do, a presentation that they would do for other academics, to something that maybe would be more interesting to the investment community. Let me stop there, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Erik. I have already a question for you. Can we get the spreadsheet with you later on?
Oh yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. Maybe Vanessa, what I'll do is I'll send it to you, and then you can.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll have that question later on with everyone, right? We're recording this presentation, right? And what we'll do is after we'll send you the link for the presentation, the YouTube of Inova, all right? And all the extra material that we can get with our speakers today. So, and of course, again, if you have any questions, just send the questions for the Q&A so that we can talk to them in our debate by the end of the presentations. Okay, I'm pleased to invite Rona Samler as a speaker today. Rona, be welcome.
Thank you. Happy to hear.
Rona is from T3. Right before I asked her if it was T cube, because it's the Technion technology transfer, or T3. And then she told me it's a T3. So something I've learned today and I'm sharing with you.
So thank you once again. Happy to be here and appreciate the opportunity to share with you a little bit of our sites. I'll try to use this as last slides that I can. I'll just walk you a little bit through that. Let me just share the relevant one, and here we go. So I'll just go very quickly through that, saying obviously our key responsibilities for tech transfer is, or I should say T3 is the Technion technology transfer. It's a little bit, by the way, similar to the US. We are the tech transfer office rather than the company. This is unusual in Israel, but we are a part of TRDF, which is the Technion Research and Development Foundation. And other than that, I just want to make sure, do you see the full screen here? Yeah, okay.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So our key purpose is like mentioned before by my colleagues, is to valorize and access and exploit the technology and innovation that is developed at the Technion. We see ourselves as the commercialization arm, working with the faculty and obviously with the industry, and our team is composed of people from the industry, having the relevant professional technological R&D background in each relevant vertical, and aiding and supporting the ideation and development of the intellectual properties that are developed. So in very short, cultivating the IP and forming the spin-off is definitely one of our strengths and targets. And I would say that I've joined Technion 2 years ago, January 19, and I had previous few years in another university in Israel, but in my background, I'm completely from the industry startups slash VC side of the table, and until 8 years ago, when somebody would ask me about tech transfer, all I knew was bring me a waiver and come back. So my aim and my goal was to synchronize, align, and take part in what we call the innovative ecosystem, and we see ourselves as the partner of that. And with the aim of obviously licensing out to our partners and around the table. So we would support the A to Z, and this starts always with the research by nature of the kind of the beast. It's pretty early stage, so the scientific team invests a lot in ideation, in the protection of the IP, guiding the R&D different plans, and here we have a lot of support starting from government and down and up to the internal funds. I'll talk a little bit about that later, and reaching out to the industry, to the entrepreneurship and investment ecosystem, working together towards licensing. I should say that Technion stands out by its DNA to initiate companies quite uniquely in Israel, and I will show that is reflected. We have over 100 affiliated companies which were developed either by Technion IP or its alumni. So we know the value of that. It has kind of two ways. One is how do we support and how do we leverage the kind of early stage research towards proof of concept, and then again, once we have a term sheet signed and the company is formed, how do we support them through the high risk value? So I'll just say that this is just saying in a nutshell that we have a very generous and equally shared risk-benefit ratio, meaning that the typical deal will probably be based always on royalties. Some payments may be relevant, but and when we inform companies, then we also will have an equity stake in the company. We do offer a kind of a two-way model. The traditional model will say that 1/3 will be for the entrepreneurs, another third for the investors, and then the Technion and inventors will share the third of the equity. Alternatively, we sometimes companies prefer the exit fee model, which is obviously a lower number, non-diluted from the end of the value of the materialization of the company. Let me see if I haven't jumped here. I think I have. Yeah, sorry. So this will give you a kind of an example. We have around 15 spin-offs every year. I just took the, sorry, it keeps popping. I just took the 15 companies that we've formed in the last academic year, ended September 20. And as you see, it's quite diverse from diagnostics through medical devices, optics, and as well as engineering and fintech. And I should say that I think that one of the strengths of the Technion, as it's called in Israel, it's kind of the Israeli MIT, is to say that we're very proud in our engineering capabilities, alongside having an internal medical center that can facilitate both. And I think that in the last couple of years, and more pronouncedly nowadays, we put a lot of focus and emphasis on multidisciplinary and what we call bioconvergence as a national effort to kind of break the silos and work through different multidisciplinary stages. We have our tools for supporting as soon as pre-seed even, and up to more advanced B rounds. So the Drive Accelerator will be the kind of, once the company is formed, the Drive Accelerator will offer up to $100,000 and a lot of mentorship in order to allow the company to be able to actually secure the seed funding. We have another internal fund that can support up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, and as well as the TIOF, which is the Technion Investor Opportunity Fund, for following on investments up to $1 million. The Technion is a targeted healthcare fund, which has invested in around 20-30 companies to date. Again, part of them are based on Technion IP developed here. Part of it is based on its alumni, and we have been we're benefiting from exits in each one of those tools. I don't know if I have more time. This is just to show you a kind of, in a nutshell,
you do. You still have like around just 6 minutes at least.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you. So just kind of an overview glance of our over 100 affiliate companies, and the ones that you see on top are the ones that have exited either through M&A or IPO. And again, it goes from immunotherapy, cancer, cardiologic medical devices, and through robotics and home use, etc. So it's very diverse. Just to give you an example of that, so recently from the last year, we have Mazor Robotics, which, by the way, was it took like almost 18 years from inception of the company, of the startup, and up to the being acquired by Medtronic in 2019. Stellantis, which was backed starting from Amit healthcare venture, and we were actually the key main shareholder up to its acquirement by IMS in 2019. And two other companies, just as an example of the ones that we've exited. As a quick glance of our current spin-offs, among the ones that are just recently formed and in the news. So we have H2 Pro in hydrogen fuel cells. We have an OR, which is actually it's called Rapid Diagnostics. And this company was within the global atmosphere formed just this year to develop high throughput at-home COVID test, which can give results within kind of minutes. I can also share with you that internally at the campus, we hold a kind of a clinical study and with volunteers being able to check up, and it looks very good and very promising. Aleph Farm is in the exciting world of cultured meat, with Cargill backed as an investor, and very promising Fillet, which is based on kind of electrical, or I would say electronic nose and sensors for the industry 4.0, and again quite advanced with key strategic investors supporting the company. Codota, an NI-powered tool for software development, and recent license also COVID related of the Maya sticker as an antiviral protective sticker to be put on top of facial masks, and gone through scaled manufacturing. So this is to give you a little bit of a glance, and to say that we are very focused on raising startups. We do support them with equity, holding, and we try to guide the companies and be supportive as much as we can through mentorship and having a board or an observer board director seat in the company to be very involved and following on.
Thank you, Rona. Thank you very much. Okay, well, let me just give a few information. First, we will have all the we'll communicate with all of you right after this, right, with the slides and all the information we can get with the speakers. So you'll get in the email, you'll get the info in the email that you subscribe to the webinar, right? And also we'll send you the link for this recording. So if you are willing to get some other information on future webinars and future activities from the global partners, please subscribe to Inova Unicamp LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook. We do disseminate our information in there, right? Okay, we come to our last speaker, Professor Newton Frateschi from Unicamp. Newton, who was the one who actually first said, let's have a meeting on this matter, because the whole year we had lots of conversations with our partners on this subject. And I think, well, thank you, Newton, for encouraging us to hold this webinar on this. Please be welcome.
Hello. Hi. Well, thank you very much. I mean, first I'd like to thank all the speakers. It's wonderful to hear, you know, so much about their achievements. And also I clearly see that we are facing now a lot of things that actually have faced before. So we see, I'm sure that was not easy. And there's a lot of issues that we think that's only applied to us, but I think it's apparently it's universal. So, So before anything, thank you very much. I will share my screen here, and I will be talking a little bit more specifically, not the overall funding of research and funding innovation and everything through cultural investments, and also through research agencies or some of these research agencies that actually help with funding startups. Or I'm thinking I'll be focused much more in our plans for actually how the university here in Brazil, particularly a public university, can participate in either seed money or really investment, but always in exchange for equity. So we're not talking about licensing or royalties, but the way we're thinking that we can do this in Brazil, because this is very new. And although I just heard now from the United States, from Israel, from the United Kingdom, that this is very well established for many years, in Brazil it's not. So, and I think it's gonna be useful for a lot of people that actually, for countries that have this particular situation between public and private interaction. So I'll put my presentation here. In some cases, I'll go through some details, and I hope I don't, but I think they are important. Some, like some of the details are very important. So that's what I want to do here. I'll try to share my screen, and I'll try to be fast such that we have a discussion, a nice discussion a little later. Okay, so I hope my screen is there. I'm putting the presentation mode. Okay.
It works.
Great. Okay, so I already did the introduction. I'm not going to go through that. We are the innovation agency. Just this. We have like 4 axes: intellectual property, partnerships and cooperative projects, entrepreneurship. We have a science park and incubator. And also it's very important, institutional relations and communication, because all this has to do with working together and also putting together academy and the world outside academy. But I'm not going to go through this. I just want to talk about, like I said before, how we can directly fund companies and how we are planning to doing this. So let me give you the innovation scenario that we see now, such that you see the potential that we have here. First of all, we have like a portfolio of over 1,000 patents, several areas. And as you know, a lot of these technologies are low TRL, and some of them are disruptive. So it's hard for these technologies to be easily licensed to big companies. Although, so some of them, it's hard for them to be licensed. So a lot of them could benefit by us if we can help them making our own companies, spin-offs or spin-outs, like I understand it's said in Cambridge. One thing what we see here, most of these deposits are in Brazil. When we talk about the patents outside Brazil, and if you think about the real startup, if you want to have a real success, you have to think about the world market. So we go through PCTs. I'd like to show these numbers that we file, but we don't have budget then to nationalize in each country that the market is later on. So what happens is that although we do all this PCT filing, the international filing is very low. And one of the reasons that we don't have money to actually do this. So when we license a technology to a company, a big company, they have to do the filing. But if there's no big company actually licensing the technology and you want to start a startup, the startup doesn't have the money. And then one of the main important things for a startup to be formed, which is having a good, solid intellectual property situation, it doesn't go through if the market is outside Brazil. So this is one of the reasons we need this type of money. In terms of license, actually you have 13% of a portfolio is licensed. So, but a lot of these, and we generate some royalties, like 1.7 million reais in royalties. But again, a lot of this technologies may not even exist because we end up losing the opportunity of actually doing the protection in where the market should be. Nevertheless, we have 15 spin-offs created. So, I mean, they actually end up happening. And that has nothing to do with money investment for the university. They basically can get money from investors for agencies, like I mentioned before, but there's no program in Brazil, or particularly there's no program in our university for doing that. And also, indirectly, we have today like over 1,000 alumni companies, and they basically generate a revenue which is about 4 times almost the budget of the university. And these companies are 60% of them are in the metropolitan area of Campinas. So there is an impact of the university. So, and the question we have here is, okay, what's best? Or perhaps if you had a participation in some of these companies, what would be the return? That's one problem, that's one question. But more important than that, if we could help new companies to be formed, if we could help financially helping these companies to be formed, how much bigger would this be? And so again, so the scenario as a summary, we have over 1,000 patents, mostly low TRL, some disruptive. International deposits depend upon external investment, and the spin-offs cannot make it. Startups or spin-offs, they usually are the solution for disruptive technology, low TRL, but they need a solid and defensible IP protection where the market, and also has to be where the market is, so needs internationalization. We have over 1,000 companies and 55 spin-offs. And so now we look at the numbers, 1.8 million in royalties. If you compare with 8 billion companies, actually it's a revenue of 8 billion. If we have a small participation over, of the value of these companies, the return, what would be the return? So obviously you have to think about all the money that was invested in companies that basically don't generate any revenue, okay? Okay, what's our goal? We want to promote effective tech transfer from know-how technology from the university. We want to stimulate and fund market internationalization and world impact. We want to leverage our incubator, and we want to feed and support the local and Brazilian technology-based ecosystem. And we want return directly part of public investment. So to me, the first 4 are the most important. The 5th one, as we heard here from the other speakers, perhaps this is important, but I believe the 4 first missions are more important. What our target companies, technology-based companies born in universities, this is very similar to Cambridge Enterprise, and the technology may or may not have the ownership of Unicamp. The incubated companies, also external company that may license or acquire Unicamp's technology. And then technology-based companies in general, whose technologies are of interest of Unicamp for possible partnerships. So this is our goal, the companies that we like to finance. And what are the legal challenges? We have a new legislation that allows the investment in companies. However, most innovative universities and technological centers, including Unicamp, are public. And basically there's no public budget or reasoning for direct investment. In terms of policies, I understand that here there's a lot of public investment in both in University of Florida, in Israel, and Cambridge. So perhaps they may think about it, okay? But then the other thing is, the only thing perhaps the university can do is to bring as an economic investment the value of the technology, as is done in several places. However, even if the money was available, private-public interaction is extremely complex, ineffective, slow, and is totally incompatible with the real private investment world. This is a situation in Brazil, and I know it's a situation in many other places. And then we have like juridical insecurity, and there's a huge investment risk. So how can we actually go over this? The other thing is, nowadays, our innovation policy, the selling of Unicamp's technology, needs the University Council approval, which is something that takes time, and involves a lot of politics, and it's a little bit complicated. So these are real challenges. And what is the strategy for decoupling the university from this other world where the investment can happen a little bit more efficiently? The new legislation also allows the innovation agencies to be legally independent from the university. Then the idea is to create a non-profit organization that would be created by Unicamp, and Unicamp would be the owner. I understand that Cambridge went through something similar to this, right? The non-profit organization then creates the investment fund corporation. And the corporation is open for investors. They can sell debentures, shares, whatever. The investors then can be investors, entrepreneurs, endowment that we recently created at Unicamp, and other investment funds that may be available. So the drawing of the structure is now Inova Unicamp is here. We create a new Inova non-profit organization outside the university. This allows the creation of an investment fund corporation. Then at this whole area here can have other investors, the entrepreneurs and founders. The endowment of Unicamp can invest in these startups. Particularly for the cases in which the technologies are owned by the university, okay, the university may give the technology, and I mentioned, in order for us to sell the technology, we have to approve in our university council, but let's assume that we give it in exchange for equity. So the spin-offs and companies that acquire our technology, this is the part that we were gonna get a share for our equity, okay? But the others will just be normal companies. Okay, so the governance for these structures should be the same as this Inova today. So it's an upper board, it's presided by the rector of the university, and also it's coordinated by the executive director with those four directors that I mentioned before, both the nonprofit and Inova and Unicamp. Now the investment funds is more like Cambridge Enterprise. It has members for the academy, but also has members appointed by investors with experience in investment funds, creation of new technology-based companies. Also entrepreneurs from the Unicamp alumni companies. This is the proposal, because we need a profound balance between the freedom of professional performance in investment decisions and the general guidelines based on the interests of Unicamp. And this is the real challenge. And how we think about equity. So for these spin-offs or companies acquiring Unicamp's technology, the university indirect investment is the technology value. The company needs at least one-to-one matching from entrepreneurs and other investors. We heard also here about dilution. We think that perhaps the technology value is kept fixed. If it's kept fixed, the equity can be recalculated upon dilution. This imposes a limit for dilution. I don't know if it's good or not. We're thinking about it. So finally, for other startups that are of interest, but they may even license technology normally, like other companies do now. But in this case, all the investments is from the investment fund corporation. So this is the idea. And the exit and returns to the university, let's say, we are thinking about stock options because this decouples legal responsibility for the exit of the company. But in case A, that's another problem that we have to consider. And in case A, I mean, the companies that have some technology, there's a return to Unicamp corporation funds. We had to report its share if there is any investment. But there are some cases that the only investment will be the value of the technology. In this case, basically, this money returned to the same channel that royalties returns to the university. And B, when there's no technology from the university, or at least no technology that was acquired by the company, this returns the share to the corporate fund and helps financing new companies, okay? So basically, that is what I would like to say. It's a proposition. We are working on this, and we're still in the very early stage. We hope next year we can actually come with this real established, and I think it's going to make a great impact of whatever in the socioeconomic impact in society if we basically are successful in doing this. Okay, thank you very much, and I will stop sharing my screen here.
Thank you, Newton. Well, I'd like to invite back all of our speakers, Rona, Caroline, Erik. And the first thing we have to do before we go to the debate, I would like to remind all of the people that are watching us. In fact, many thanks. We have so many people watching us, like people from the University of São Paulo, from the Federal University of São Carlos, and all around South America, and many people that do understand a lot about this matter with us today. So I guess it will be a very nice debate. First, before we go to the debate, Katja just reminded me we have to make the official photo of the webinar. Otherwise, I'll get in trouble with the team. So Are we all set, Katya? Yeah?
Awkward.
And?
The last one.
Okay.
Okay.
We good?
I'll think something different.
We finish it.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Katya.
And all of these webinars, we have to go through a course on how making those photos. Okay, many thanks all of you for participating. I did learn a lot from each of you. So we'll start with a few questions. The first question is my question. Oh, and by the way, as I told you before we started, if you have any questions to ask each other, just feel free to do that, right? Well, I have a question first. I'd like to ask Caroline. Caroline, I didn't quite get when you presented all of the funds, the Quantum Fund, then the University Venture and the Challenge Fund. Do those funds coexist until now? Or they were all merged to Cambridge Enterprise Fund? That was not clear to me.
So yes, so they operated as separate funds, and then in 2006 they were amalgamated into Cambridge Enterprise seed funds. So it's now one fund, although our data in terms of collecting, in terms of how much has been invested, goes back to 1995 to the venture fund.
Okay, thank you very much. There's a question here for each of you that I think it's an interesting question. First thing, they'd like to know if it's more common for academics to start those spin-offs that are invested and so on, or someone from outside the university to start the company. How does it work? Let's start with Rona. Rona, how does it work in Israel? In Technion?
In most cases, it would be, I mean, push and pull. I mean, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are always interested in what's new, and the more specific in the field they are, it eases us, you know, to target them to the relevant technologies. Nevertheless, I think that we do have our kind of leading star serial entrepreneur faculty members that you see that they initiate and form more than one company, and I guess that that it goes both ways. I can say that statistically, most of our, I think that more than half of our companies are within the field of biomedical, and it makes sense both on the kind of innovation cycle along with the engineering and biomedical skill set and capabilities that are strengths.
Thank you. Erik, how does it go?
Yeah. So somebody, it wasn't me, but somebody once said there are no things further apart than tenure and entrepreneurship. Okay. Think about that. Tenure, you've got the best job security ever. Entrepreneurship, you might have a paycheck Monday, right? There is a lot of validity to that, okay? But we get many more, especially in the last decade, let's say, entrepreneurs coming in from the outside, pulling the technology out. Frankly, that's our preferred model for a couple of reasons, okay? One is if a faculty member decides to then start a company and take it out, many times, again, in their background, they're not prepared for that, right? They know the technology very, very deeply, but they've never been trained, in most cases, right, to understand all of the other things that will make the company fail. And there's many studies that show that for startup tech companies that fail, I don't know if it's 90%, but the majority of the time, it's not because of failure of the technology, right? It's because the marketing and the management, the finance, and so on. So the thing that they're not trained in has the highest probability of causing the failure of the company, okay? The second thing is if a really top-notch faculty member takes it out and then, you know, spends a significant amount of time, we're losing a top-notch faculty member. Our preferred model is, frankly, if we bring an entrepreneur from the outside, and then we can engage the faculty member either on the scientific advisory board or some kind of a scientific advisory role. And better yet, if you can engage a grad student or a postdoc, you know, into that company, you know, they can move into that company maybe as an employee, right? They could start consulting with the company, move in, because many times they have almost as deep technical knowledge as the faculty member.
We have the same issues here, right, Newton? So,
everybody has the same issues.
I think that's the best model. And I totally agree that the postdoc probably knows better than the professor about technology.
Yeah, sometimes they are the ones that are, you know, hands-on on the maybe it's their own thesis, and they're very much involved in the technical phase. And I fully agree with Erik. I think that the nature of having a very early stage research would probably fit with that kind of management to a certain point. Once, of course, when you get closer to the market and realization, obviously you'll have to have another set of skills of the management.
Hire a CEO, possibly, and so on. Caroline, how does...
I was going to say I would agree with everything that's been said. I think, you know, for us, especially at Cambridge, I mean, one of the, you know, we hire really curious people. You know, our academics, it's curiosity that fuels them, and so very often the conversation actually starts about, you know, is this something that you want to do? Because, you know, the spin out is a considerable commitment from them as founders, and as Erik says, you know, not often, apart from those serial entrepreneurs with an awful lot of experience about what that means. You know, working with an existing company not only is less of an investment in terms of time, but still allows them to engage and be part of that. I think the other thing that we talk about as well is the actual product. So where there's a kind of like a single product idea, it's much easier for that to be then licensed into an existing company. But where you're looking at a platform technology or a pipeline of products or IP that has the potential to build out an infrastructure, that often as well determines whether or not we think that a spin out might be the preferential sort of route for that. But I would say, just in terms of numbers, we do an awful lot more licensing than we do of spin outs.
Yeah. Okay. For us, it works the same.
Yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, sorry, we have some cases that the professor actually left and then came back, but it's like very not common. And I totally agree. I mean, we even have now in our new innovation policy, the possibility that the professor can leave, you know, and be in a company, because some of the investors want the inventor to be in the company. So he must be in the company, but alone, only with the technical knowledge, only by being the inventor, as Erik said, there's a lot of other skills and things that need to be considered. And yeah, the real entrepreneur can come together and form the best team. We are waiting to see how many professors will actually leave, start a company, and say goodbye to the university. I don't know, perhaps no one.
We have a question about the industrial startups here, because there is quite a difference between industrial startups and the investment you need, for example, for an IT startup, right? So the point is that how do you connect the interest of the investors to this, and how do you explain for the investors how it happens with them, showing the difference when you have a very good industrial startup to start with? Can you start with that question, Erik? We know that's different, huh? IT generally is...
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, think about this. An industrial startup where you need a tremendous amount of equipment, a lot of time, a tremendous amount of capital go in, versus you got an IT startup where you need a bedroom, hopefully, you know, the right computing infrastructure and so on. If you have to, I mean, frankly, if somebody comes to you and you have to answer that question, you've already lost. Because you know, the investors that come to us, they know their field. Investors that come to us and say, show us everything, usually are going to be it's going to be a very, very difficult push to get that to success. And the biggest negative out of all of this, and actually this goes back also to the question of faculty taking technology out, right? The worst case scenario, in my opinion, is you have a really great technology that's taken up by somebody who's not really good. Not only have you not got success in that, but you've consumed the technology into an opportunity that probably isn't going to be successful, right? So it's the same kind of philosophy.
Okay.
So can I jump in? I was just going to say I agree completely, and I think there's a number of things that I would add. That last point, though, I mean, one of the things that we are quite mindful of in terms of licensing out technology is that option to take it back again if it's not being properly utilized, because you know that for us is that the absolute wasteland of you know potential impact not being taken to market or not being delivered. I also agree that investors rarely come blind. You know, they come with a preference for sectors, they come with a preference for types of startups that they want to see, types of technologies that they want to get involved in. And they will understand all of the kind of the barriers and the pain points in terms of what those need. I think we try and facilitate that by enabling access back to the university's facilities. So some of those that equipment is then utilized. You know, we can, our academics can still access that or facilitate access, but it also comes back to the ecosystem, the wider ecosystem. You know, having, you know, we have a make space, we have a bio make space, we have incubators and accelerators that are specific for industrial startups, so that they can access that level of equipment at a very low cost to them. But it needs to be built into their business planning and their modeling for how they do that kind of business formation and development anyway.
Newton, Rona, would you like to add something to that?
No, I totally agree with that, and I think that you know, eventually, on one hand, the clock only goes you know, in one you know, just one side, and we are the solicitors, so obviously we are, you know, offering and accessing to all the others in the value chain. Nevertheless, we see ourselves as you know, one of the partners within that kind of innovation industry or park or ecosystem. So we try to target the best that we can, and like Karen said, I mean, we always save the option for we don't sell the IP, and we license that subject to diligence and milestones, etc. And it's rarely that that it happens. To be honest, that if a company licenses the technology and it returns back, then we will probably relicense that, but that's definitely an opportunity.
I think I mean, investment is investment, but there's a huge difference in a barrier, you know, the amount of money that you put for the infrastructure. So we've been studying this, the hardware startups. From 2014, there was, because the IoT, there's a lot of demand for companies that actually do real things, not only software. And there's a huge growth of these companies. And this, I think, applies for all the other industrial hardware. So they need things, they need equipment, they need the infrastructure. And sometimes the key for their technology is needs very expensive equipment. And what I think is that what the world is doing in order to solve this problem, I see things like the Qualcomm Institute in San Diego, where you have like the lab from the university, more or less like Caroline actually mentioned. You basically make more available. You bring the startups inside the university to use their infrastructure. So that lowers a little bit the barriers, right? Some other places, I mean, investment funds are actually creating this environment such that they can support, they can share this possibilities, including all the other things, just prototyping that you need in small, medium, and large volumes. So, yeah, and the third possibility is some industries are doing this, like IMAX. They basically do from inside, and then they create a spin-out that way. So I think the whole thing is about lowering the barrier, but the investment, the idea of the investment, I think is the same.
So we have, sorry, go on, Erik.
Just one more thing. So one model that was very interesting that we used a number of years ago was we had an industrial-based technology, and there was a tremendous amount of capital expenditure that was going to be required. What we did was we took the startup company and we paired them with one of our big industrial companies that had the equipment, okay? And so it was kind of a three-way deal. We did the license to the startup. The startup did a separate deal with the large company, and essentially what the startup got, or what the large company got, was they got first access to the first, I think it was 100 units of the technology that came out, right? So again, that kind of shared risk, shared return model, everybody's got to benefit from that, but by sharing the risk, and frankly, for the big company, they had excess capacity and the equipment that was needed. And so it worked very well for them. So I think to Carolyn's point and Newton's point about, there is equipment out there. You just got to figure out the right deal where it makes sense for everybody to have access to that equipment. Thanks.
Caroline, would you like to say something else?
I was just going to say a couple of examples. So at the Cambridge Science Park, which is one of our oldest science parks in the city, Tusk Park have just opened a bio incubator. So this is kind of a 5-story innovation center, but with all of the wet lab facilities that startups might need. But we've had examples where Anglian Water, one of the big utility suppliers, and Bouygues, who are big utilities and constructions, have done exactly what Erik said. They've basically developed a symbiotic relationship with startups where they can offer not just the equipment and the testing facilities, but their access to their customer base as well, in exchange for having first dibs on looking at the technology as it develops.
Diana sent us a question. In fact, here in South America, this environment for investing, the investment ecosystem is starting to be a bit stronger, but in fact, we are with that in construction. So she's asking if you would suggest finding capital internationally. So if you would suggest to find an investor somewhere else in case you have a spin-off or a startup you'd like to help start. What would you say about that? Rona, would you like to start? Oh, yeah?
No, I think Erik wanted to comment on that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, just very quickly. Here's what I would say. It's I think a failing proposition to go to an investment fund in another country and say, look, we have this deal here we think you'd be really interested in, okay? Having been in investment funds, it doesn't make sense most of the time, and I don't speak for all funds by any stretch of the imagination, because there is no proximity, right? Many times if you're in a fund and you have a significant investment, you're going to take a board seat, and so it makes it really difficult. Now with what we've gone through in terms of, we're Zooming, it probably makes it easier, but sometimes as the investor, you have to walk in the door. If on the other hand, you have a fund that says, we're really interested in Brazil, Peru, and wherever it is, right? And they've got that stated interest because they see a pipeline of opportunity there, right? That, I think, in my opinion, is a really good kind of, potential marriage, because they've already essentially in their mind said, okay, we're willing to consider, should the pipeline exist, we're willing to consider making the investment in the foundation, the people that have to be in country and so on, right? So to me, that's kind of the best situation.
Newton, maybe you could comment a little bit on our thoughts for the exits of our companies, huh? Like when we say the exit, in fact, we're like searching for the correct partners for our companies to partner with universities or funding investments abroad. Could you comment a little bit on that, Newton?
What we are thinking now is to evaluate not only companies, but the technologies, from the beginning, how we can best match with the market. And in many cases, the market is not here. I mean, the market is outside. And in some cases, depending on the same criteria that actually Erik showed us in that model, depending on some of those answers, if you look from inside, we know there's going to be an interest from somebody from outside Brazil. And in some cases, you may look for a big company, not a small company, In some cases, we want to promote a spin-off. And the main problem here is, okay, we may want to have a spin-off, but how can you bring the funding to actually make that a spin-off, to actually, for instance, to deposit the patent outside? It may cost a lot of money, for instance, and you need like a strong license and a strong patent. And in that case, what we see right now is that there's no money for that. So funding that, in exchange for equity to us would really allow us, after we do our complete analysis of our portfolio, will help us to actually execute whatever we think is best for the technology. So we are doing this analysis here, but once we have the exit, we need to have money for actually some of those things to actually be executed. Okay, so I don't know if I was clear. Yeah.
Okay, Caroline, Rona, would you like to add something for that? Have you had to search for investment abroad?
Yeah, I think that eventually it's a matter of where the market is and how competitive, what we can offer in sense of investments. And to be honest, we do have limited resources. We are backed on different programs, and some part of them governmental, others are internal funds. But eventually, I think that we have a lot of opportunities coming from abroad, and we will introduce them and do our best for the company, and not only from the legal side of having a seat over there and thinking of the benefit, but also I think that the global world is probably a little bit outside Israel. I mean, it's an important country, but in sense of market share, probably not the key one. So we're definitely encouraging and supporting the investments abroad.
Caroline?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with what Erik said. I think, starting off at home in the first instance is always going to be the preferential option. And, we're very lucky. We have a strong reputation where we have investors coming to us to see, what's going on, what we have, if you like, in the portfolio. I'd say one of the things that we do encourage, especially some of our early stage startups, is in getting involved on international accelerator programs. Not necessarily because sounds really bad, not necessarily because they're teaching them anything that we don't know, but for example, companies that we've worked with that we've invested in have then gone on, say, to join Y Combinator. And what that's done is open up an entirely different market for US investment and Canadian investment into their company. But on either on a kind of like high growth tech side, or if it's a very specific thing around health or biomedical sciences, then that would be something that we would advocate strongly. And we have what we call, I guess, accelerator floozies. I don't know if that's a term you recognize.
The first time I hear it, I'll Google it later.
So basically, companies who might go on a number of different accelerators.
Okay.
And it sort of sometimes it's a little bit frustrating for the accelerator, but I think it's about what the company themselves, what the startup is taking from each experience. Some might be about developing the company, some might be developing the technology, some might be about access to markets. So I mentioned before, there's a lot of corporate accelerators that are now offering access to customers and routes to market. But the investment piece, I think, is a really, really big one. So the company I mentioned, they went and within a matter of weeks, I think 8 to 10 weeks, had secured $4 million worth of investment through being on the Y Combinator program, which wouldn't have happened in that time frame. Not saying it wouldn't have happened at all, but wouldn't have happened in that time frame had they not sort of stepped outside of the UK market.
Thank you. Very good example. Well, we have another question from Jenny here in Brazil. She's asking, how much is the patent important? I'll ask, is the patent important? How is the patent important in hard science companies, right? I had some conversations with some investors recently, and I have a very good, a broader view on that right now. People question that a lot in Brazil because for some time we had some difficulties in getting our patents granted in the country, right? But we start working as soon as the patent, we file for the patent. So I'd like to hear from your point of view, how much the investor looks at the patent. Caroline, would you like to start? You finish later on.
Yeah. Critical for us, I think critical in 99.9% of times. I mean, obviously you've got software, which is not necessarily patentable. Intricacies around that, but software aside, unless you have got something that you are completely sure that you're going to be first to market with, and that it's the first to market advantage that's going to secure you the kind of the market adoption, then in our case, and especially with hard science and hard technology, then the patent is everything. I sat in yesterday on some of our team giving a talk to a couple of departments within the university, and like one of the kind of the big messages at the end is like, you know, if you think you have anything that has any IP value, please don't publish it, you know, please don't put it in a journal, please don't do anything until you've just come and spoken to us about the kind of registrability of it. So I think for us it's critical, for the university it's critical, for the researcher, for the academic it's critical, for the investor it's absolutely vital. You know, one of the first questions they will ask is sort of, you know, what protection you have. And it doesn't matter even if it's, you know, we've had investors invest, even if the patent hasn't been formally registered, but the fact that it's been submitted, the fact that there is, you know, patentable IP, that's essentially what they're looking at in most cases.
Would you like to comment a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, look, from what I know, definitely, and it's not enough to have a patent. It has to be a defensible patent. I mean, and if something that you can change a little bit and you can actually bypass that patent, nobody's going to invest in your company. That's my impression. So yes, it's very, very important. But there's another issue that I saw in these startups. Many startups, they basically start filing a lot of things, a lot of patents, just to adding value to them, because they are actually going to become attractive for some big companies to come and acquire them. And in that case, in many cases, the most important things that they are doing is kept as a know-how, a secret, not even patent. That's another way of protecting it. But if it's coming from a university technology, there's no other option than to have it very well protected. Otherwise, nobody's going to actually go for it in terms of investing. That's my opinion.
Erik, Rona, would you like to add?
Rona, please.
Yeah, well, I totally agree. Absolutely critical, and we try to enforce, to protect as wide as we can, at least in those deep technology and engineering that we have. Like Karen said, I mean, there's always the question about the software, and sometimes you don't even want to publish that. Sometimes you're running after ahead of time with a seminar or publication, and it's a little bit like Erik said it at the beginning of our meeting, the difference between entrepreneurship and tenure. Then I think that's pretty much sums it up, because when the faculty member is, at first in the first years, it's everything about publication, and then when you go through the process and you have veterans and quite established, so probably the heavy load of the science is already out there and hopefully protected. So yes, that's always the debate, and we'll try and do ourselves with a cost-efficient ratio, and well, statistics are against us, and we're practically running the worst business ROI globally, because we're chasing and protecting or funding, I would say, intellectual property that in most cases will be 15 years before it will be even considered as proceed. So that's always a debate, and definitely critical.
Okay, Vanessa, could I add one thing? So in the investment world, we had some things called execution plays, which is kind of exactly what it sounds like. The path to profitability is just in execution, right? It's just go, do it right, do it really well, make sure you got the resources lined up and get to market, go, right? In the university environment, there are far fewer, in my opinion, execution plays than there are in, you know, the rest of investing in technology from outside. So I think the IP is really important. I think the danger comes in when, and I've seen this in a number of organizations, including some universities, where the focus gets to be on the IP rather than the resulting commercialization, right? It's on let's collect patents, right? And then I think as Newton has already said, you get to those you know, national filing phase and you're going, oh my God, look at the bills here, right? So I think that can be dangerous, right? So here's an interesting exercise that I use in my class. So again, I teach entrepreneurship, and in the class that I teach, all the students have to form companies and they go, right? And many of these companies become very, very successful. One was sold yesterday for you know, a reasonable amount of money. And so what I do is 2/3 of the way through the class, all the student teams, you know, the little companies have got a technology basis. And I give them the only kind of surprise assignment in the entire semester, which is you have to walk in here next week, right? You've built, through 2/3 of the semester, you've built up the case that because of your patented technology or patent pending technology, you have the advantage. You have to walk in here next week. You have to solve the same customer need. You can't use your own technology, okay? And so that really then gets a certain understanding. First of all, it's about the market need, right? And frankly, if you can succeed in that exercise, and they always say, well, we can't, it's all about technology. I say, well, okay, then you fail the assignment. We'll figure it out, right? But if you can succeed, if you go through that exercise, it gets people to understand it really is about meeting the market need. The IP is a mechanism to get there and to give a level of protection, a time monopoly to people that are going to invest significant capital in some cases in, you know, kind of not only starting the startup, but growing the startup, right? The other thing gets people to understand is that, okay, the IP is, again, a means to an end. It's not the end, okay?
Great.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I have one question that I'd like to ask you. Someone is asking if the licensing, the number of licenses is a good indicator for technology transfer here for universities in Latin America. I would like to broaden this, right? Because I know this is a very common discussion, right? For example, in the United Kingdom, so it's about impact, right? So not only about the numbers. Yeah. So I'd like to hear from you, from all of your experiences. What do you think is the number of license we make as a technology transfer office the main indicator, or what do you use besides the number of licenses as an indicator of what you have been doing? And that was my daughter here. Okay, who would like to start? Oh, no one. I'll have to ask.
Yeah, I can say something.
Everyone.
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay, come on, Newton. Start on that. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I like a lot that Erik mentioned that in terms of patents, but we are changing this a lot. I mean, the mindset of IP. So you have a number of IPs, and then we are the university that files the most number of patents, and this is just increasing our bills, and it's not making great impact. So we are basically away from this, and I think the more mature universities are actually forgetting about this. We want to know the impact. Now, how we measure this impact? License, I have heard, is not a good way either, because if you look the amount of money put in research and development in the university for a given patent to be created, and then the amount of royalties that you get after that is so small. So you may say, look, I can invest better my money, some places may say. I think it's one of the indicators. The final answer is you have to look at the number of IPs, but most importantly, the number of invention disclosures that you see how innovative is your university. You have to see how many startups or spin-offs or spin-outs that you create in your university. You have to look, licenses are good, and also what type of licenses. Some licenses only have a very strong social impact. Some others may create a new product, may generate more jobs. And so the number of alumni companies is also another way of seeing that. So I think there's no single indicator that will say, okay, you're doing well. I mean, it's a bunch of indicators, and there's always a lot of qualitative analysis of the numbers. If you use any of this, only one number, like the number of patents, number of license, number of spin-outs, number of companies incubated, any one of these numbers may give you the wrong number, the wrong impression. That's my opinion. So it's a very complex question.
Okay, Erik?
Yeah, so I think, look, we look at it in terms of an ecosystem, okay? And what I mean by that is if you think about number of patents, number of licenses, invention disclosures, why do we do that? It's easy to count, right? It's easy. Everybody wants to keep score. Everybody wants to keep score, whether it's football or, you know, whatever it is, everybody wants to keep score. And okay, so keeping score, you know, is important. But when I say an ecosystem, what I mean by this is, interestingly enough, when not our current technology transfer director, but the one before him came in, and he went to the vice president for research who was going to work for, and he said, okay, how do we keep score? The VPR pointed to his inbox and said, I don't want to see any more faculty complaints in that inbox, okay? And that's important because at that point, you know, we started with Gatorade. So we've had some success through the years in different technologies, right? So we can count the other number, the output numbers, right? But if you think about it, you know, I would argue that you need a much broader perspective. One is faculty satisfaction. And frankly, that drives numbers. Faculty that are coming to the University of Florida. We're looking for the absolute best faculty. As Caroline said, curiosity drives the faculty ranks. And about the second question they come in and ask right now on their interview is, okay, what's my opportunities to move technology to market, right? We look at the research dollars. As Newton said, if you look at the research dollars versus the royalty returns in almost any university, I don't know a university that isn't this way, the research dollar just dwarfs returns, right? We actually, our tech transfer office decades ago was so bad, we could see the negative impact on the research dollars coming in because companies were saying, why do I want to work with this university if I can't move technology out of the back end, right? So there's a metric there, right? So it really is much broader than just, okay, are you, patents. Patent is a cost center, right? A patent by itself is a cost. It's not a revenue stream, right? And then last thing is, people also like to count things like royalty returns, right? Especially if you're doing well, that's what you want to count. So we sold a company 2 years ago. I think it was on Rona's slide. I saw one at 1.64 billion. We sold one for 1.7 billion. Those are unicorns, right? Those are just so far off, and they almost happen. You have a process. If you have the process set up right, you enable those kinds of opportunities. But frankly, you're not driving that. The market is driving that.
Great. Caroline, Rona?
Yeah, well, personally, I don't believe in number of patents. If anything, I would cut them in half, but my key purpose is to identify which half. So if I do have
we have a similar problem here.
Yeah, but honestly, and of course, this is that there's a difference between sectors and verticals and etc. But if anything, then on the patent side, I would look at the number of invention submissions, the IDSs or the analogy, because I think this is a good kind of a good mark or good reflection on how close the team works with the faculty. And here I completely I agree with what both Newton and Erik said, and I think that if we look at the impact, it's much more than the numbers. Obviously, not the number of patents, and because I've seen things that were refiled year after year for tens of years. Does that make it to be efficient or even wise? Not necessarily. On the other hand, to look at the ROI from the royalties, well, I'm here for 2 years. Does that reflect of my work here or the years, the 10 or 15 years earlier? And even if so, I mean, would that be not even about the life cycle, but given that we can invest in the existing IP that we develop here, does that definitely and necessarily makes the monetary VC, clear cut of ROI? Probably not. So we do look at different parameters that reflect on working with the faculty. The satisfaction is one of them. How close the invention, the new development is another one. For me, it's important that the team is at least once a quarter engaged within social faculty meetings, and the more involved, the more partners we are with the faculties, the more they see us as the arm's length of their business consultants. I think that we're probably there. And another thing that we put a lot of emphasis on is the sponsored research agreements, not only because money is fun. Yes, it's fun, but I look at that as early engagement with industry. I mean, if you look at the number of patents ever since the Boyle, rule that says that universities will own and by that encourage universities to invest in filing patents, then yes, you see an exploding number of patents filed. But if you look at the level of research funds, then normally it would be steady, if not going down. And the only thing that really correlates with success and tech transfer is the number of transactions and collaborations with the industry that goes hand in hand with success. So as soon as possible, we would like to see as much these kind of collaborations, agreements, because first of all, it's smart money to guide the unmet need. And I think that it's also, a kind of a win-win situation for a short transaction for the industry in relatively small funds and period to kind of tap the water and have an option for license. If that succeeded and goes, matures into license, perfect. If it doesn't, we still have a huge value of understanding what's the unmet need, what's the meaningful milestone for de-risking and for leveraging the next effort. So for me, that's a key parameter.
Thank you, Rona. Caroline, we're coming to an end. Would you like to add something? Yeah.
Just really, really quickly, I was just going to say I completely agree with everything that everybody said so far. We've been doing quite a lot of work with China, and I think that's a classic example of where measuring the wrong things has led to not having the impact. So, phenomenal number of patents, phenomenal number of license agreements, but actually nothing making it to, or very little making it to market. So our CEO, who's been with us 10 years, is very specific about not having targets. So we measure, but we don't have targets because, his ethos is that actually if you say that you need X many number of patents or X many number of licenses, then you are almost destined to kind of make bad choices and bad decisions in order to meet those quotas. So it's a reflective, it's a rear looking thing that we do in terms of seeing, what's the impact been of the activity that we've done over the last year, but it gives us freedom to make the decisions that are right for the technology, right for the academic, right for the university, and hopefully that then gives us the end results that we're working for.
Many thanks, Caroline. Erik, Rona, it was such a pleasure having you here. Newton, would you like to give us a few words before we finish the webinar?
Well, thank you very much, Vanessa, for conducting this webinar. Thank you all the team from Inova. And thank you, Erik, Caroline, and Rona. It was amazing. I learned a lot. And one of the ways that we learn is that you see that things that you're thinking make sense when other people actually say something similar. So I feel I'm not crazy. So it's a great checkpoint. So thank you very much. And for all the global partners, I mean, I think I see the great benefit of having this because we exchange so much experiences here that can help anyone, anywhere. Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think I enjoyed a lot. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you for having
Brilliant.
us.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, guys. I hope to
Bye.
see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
See you later. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks a lot.